Hi, welcome to Punchline Talks, the big interview sponsored by Infostar IT Solutions. I'm Marco, an editor and owner of PunchlineGloucester.com. And today, my special guest is a multi award winning comedian, travel writer, and broadcaster, Dom Joly. Welcome, Dom. Welcome to Punchline Talks.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
No worries at all. Well, it's 25 years, isn't it? It's the anniversary this month for Trigger Happy TV. Loved the show when I was young. But before we come to that, really like to for you to explain this new show that you're launching, a chat show in Cheltenham, a speakeasy. Can you tell us all about it, please?
Yeah, so I think it's going to be a big year for me this because it is the 25th year of Trigger Happy, and I'm going to be doing lots of stuff around the country. And I really wanted to do something for Cheltenham. I've lived in Cheltenham now for nearly 6 years, but I've had a background in Cheltenham all my life. My granny lived here, so it was the first place I came to when I came over to England and stuff. So I've always been incredibly fond of Cheltenham, and I think it's an incredibly interesting place. Having toured all around Britain, I don't think there's a town similar size that punches above its weight as much as Cheltenham does. And it's got lots of incredible things going on, the festivals and events. But I really wanted to just, I think, put on my own night of the sort of thing that I'd enjoy going to, and that often I would probably end up going to London for, or Oxford maybe even. And I just thought Cheltenham needs something a bit different. So it's called Dom Joly Speakeasy, and the whole point of it is it's a kind of, I'm calling it a cabaret of curiosities, which kind of means nothing really. But essentially, the idea is I'm not going to tell you what's going to be on it. You just have to come along and trust that it's going to be a really interesting, fun night. And so it's sort of set up like a late night, like a late night talk show at the moment, where I'm sitting behind a desk and I have guests, and I'm going to have musical guests. We have an incredible guest on the first show. I mean, literally quite extraordinary musical guests, and they'll be playing, and I'll interview them. I've got comedians. We'll talk about current affairs, all sorts of stuff, interaction with the audience. But although it looks like a late night talk show, it's not late night. It's actually very reasonably timed from 7 till 9 p.m. in time for everyone to go to bed or to catch the train home. So it's good. And it's in this amazing venue called the Steam and Whistle, which used to be Cheltenham's roughest pub, I think. Well, there were a couple of rivals for that, but it used to be called the Midland, and it really was a place, where bored commuters would go for some very odd pursuits. But that has completely changed now, and it's been taken over by this great couple, and they make amazing pizzas. It's been very, it's sort of a, it's been a sort of a, it's a chic pub now, basically, but it's got this amazing venue in the basement that I don't know if people know about, and it's this 350 capacity music venue, and that's where we're going to do it.
And it's funny, actually, it's just come on our radar very shortly, very recently, actually, about the bands and things that are playing there. And if I've got this right, it's opposite the train station on the entrance to Lansdowne Business Park as well, isn't it?
It's right opposite. I mean, it's literally, yeah, you look out onto the railway station, and yeah, you've got Daya behind you and stuff, and the Lansdowne estate, and it's amazing. The couple took it over. They literally this tomorrow is their anniversary of taking it over, and they hit the ground running and opened, I think, 4 days after they got it for race goers, and they've done a great job with it. And yeah, they had EMF, who are a Forester Dean band, and they played there, but they do all sorts of indie nights and stuff. But this, I hope, is really going to put it on the map.
So how many sort of nights are you doing? Is it monthly or bi-monthly?
Yeah, so
And I believe it's
the idea is it's going to be a monthly night, first Thursday of every month.
wow, okay, fantastic. And where did the idea come from? Is it something that's been bubbling away in your mind for a while?
Well, it's just, I mean, I don't want to be rude about Cheltenham's music scene, but we are a little bit on the sort of tribute band circuit. And if I want to go and see bands that I like, normally they don't come to Cheltenham, unfortunately. Apart from things like the Jazz Festival and stuff, they go to Bristol, they go to Oxford, and so I'm doing a lot of gigs at the moment. And I thought, you know what, rather than going around the country doing all these gigs, why don't I set up my own venue and just have a go at hosting? It makes it, I have less work to do slightly, although I didn't realize how much work goes into setting it all up. But actually, it's great. It's really interesting. And I've got some really interesting people working with me. Someone who's got, Anna is working with me. Who's got she rolled out Punana and helped with Coconut Tree and stuff. So I've got a really interesting team behind me who really know what they're doing. And so for me, it's a learning process. But really, it's part laziness because I think I can walk there from home, but also I really want to add something to Cheltenham. I think Cheltenham's really on the up. I think it's become, certainly after lockdown, I think the fact that it's got not the fastest train service into London, kind of made it slightly restrictive in a way for people. But I think with the kind of rise of the digital nomad and the rise of the kind of 3 day week and stuff, I think more and more people I'm seeing are moving down to Cheltenham. And certainly in my kind of fields, artistic fields, and I've met a lot of photographers, people in telly, and I just want to encourage that because it's brilliant.
I mean, absolutely love Cheltenham, and you did right. There isn't anything really like that at the moment. The sort of live music scene, that sort of rough readiness, the spit and sawdust. I think Anna described it to me.
Well, they do have spit and sawdust. There's the Frog and Fiddle, which is really good. There's the Bottle of Sauce. There are places, lots of places doing stuff. I was originally thinking of doing this at Dunkerton's actually, but one of the things I was really keen on doing was encouraging a sort of not a big chain. I really wanted to like local people. I want to have local bands on as well as like proper big names. So I really want it to help Cheltenham a lot. And yeah, Cheltenham has a great, my cousin is much older than me, grew up in Cheltenham. She used to hang out with Brian Jones and she used to go to speakeasies back then. It was a great punk scene, weirdly, in Cheltenham in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, which you'd not imagine for Cheltenham. And there really was, there was the Beatles played there, Hendrix played there. There was a great scene in Cheltenham. And I do think that's slightly gone. We're not really on the circuit. And so I'm hoping we can change that a bit.
I think without a shadow of a doubt, I'm looking forward to coming along myself and giving it a go a couple of times as well. Of course, we'll give it as much publicity as we can for you, Dom. Can we talk about Trigger Happy TV? It's 25 years since you launched the show. I get asked this all the time, but I've got to indulge myself if you don't mind. And that is the giant squirrel and the giant rabbit, whatever it is, and they're always beating each other up. How did that idea come from?
A lot of the ideas for Trigger Happy, frankly, came from the pub, I think. We're just in the pub having a drink, and I think everyone, like, probably not everyone sits in the pub and thinks I'm going to dress as a giant squirrel and attack a fisherman, but I think everyone in the pub has weird ideas. But I got into the stage once the show started that I'd think of an idea and then I'd ring someone. So I remember one of my favorite sketches from Trigger Happy is me dressed as a giant snail crawling across a road very slowly. And I remember where we were. We were in a pub called the Cock and Bottle in Notting Hill. And I was chatting to the guy I made Trigger with. And I suddenly went, oh my God, I've got it. Giant snail. I'm going to go up to a zebra crossing and the traffic's going to stop. And then I'm going to crawl really slowly across. And I think maybe some people might have ideas like that, but then you forget about it the next day. But I literally could make a call. And 4 days later, someone had made me this costume. And I thought, oh God, I've got to do this now. But so a lot of it came from that. And once the show started, you just start to think about these, like you're constantly looking around and thinking of ideas and stuff. And so 25 years later, which is insane to me, like it makes me feel so old. My daughter was born in the same age as, in the same year as Trigger Happy in 2000. And so she's the living embodiment of it. And I think because it all happened so quickly and it became this massive show, and I don't think I really appreciated it at the time because it was a bit of a maelstrom, that actually I'm going to really enjoy the 25th anniversary where we're doing 4 really big live shows, and it's going to be a celebration of Trigger Happy, and hopefully I'll be able to enjoy it this time. And the nearest one for us, of course, is Birmingham. We're doing Birmingham Town Hall in October, and it's going to be amazing.
Okay, and you actually sold it to 80 different countries, wasn't it? The series only ran about 3 series, but 80 countries. You won a national award for it as well. I mean, it must have been a real roller coaster ride.
It was an
How did you?
insane roller coaster.
Yeah, and then you sort of switched to the BBC. How did that pan out?
BBC was a nightmare for me. I was burnt out. I really was. Making Trigger Happy was incredibly tiring because it's just, firstly, I was in charge of everything from the editing, the filming. It was like all consuming. And that's why it was so good because Sam and I just had attention to detail on everything and it was our baby. And what's interesting is when we made Trigger Happy, no one, when I say we, it's not the royal we, it's me and Sam. No one knew who we were. Everyone just left us alone to make this show. And so we could make it exactly as we wanted to. And the thing about comedy is there's no right or wrong. But the worst thing that happens with comedy is comedy by committee. And what happened was when Trigger Happy finished, I wanted to do something completely different. The BBC gave me this massive deal, and I went to the BBC. And suddenly you went from being this kind of unknown, sort of punky outsider to suddenly you were the new big thing, and everyone wanted a say, and everyone put stuff in. And I didn't enjoy that at all. The BBC's also a much more bureaucratic place. Channel 4 was very much go off and do your own thing. BBC, you had to get 30 people to tick boxes before you could do anything. The health and safety was insane, whereas we'd go off and do things. So it was very, for my sort of show, it was a very, my sort of show was very much seat of the pants, go and do it. And the BBC slowed it all down. It made it very difficult for me. And I'm not really a BBC man. I'm not very clubbable. Um, and I don't like belonging to anything, the Groucho Marx thing. I don't like belonging to anything that'll have me as a member. So I didn't enjoy it at all. So I did three series at the BBC. I had fun. And then I left. And then I kind of felt I'd done comedy really because I didn't think I'd ever beat Trigger Happy because I've going to sold it to 80 countries. So I started writing books, and that's what I've been doing for 15 years. I've written my 10th book I'm writing at the moment, and wrote travel books and been to 108 countries, and I absolutely love doing that. But it's quite exciting going back to actually be able to enjoy what we did so long ago.
Let's quickly talk about the show in Birmingham. Then your tour for Trigger Happy TV. So what kind of things, what kind of sketches are you going to be doing? You're going to be taking stuff from the actual show. You've got new materials.
Well, it's really difficult because we were offered a massive tour when Trigger Happy happened, but I'd never done any live stuff. Most people normally are stand-ups and then they go to television. I'd never done anything live. My background was very serious. I was a diplomat in Prague. I worked in Parliament as a producer for ITN. So comedy kind of fell into my lap at 30. So I was old enough that I had a hinterland, so I could maybe do something a bit broader. But live, I never did. So when they offered us a tour, we just said no. And also, if I was the Fast Show, for instance, I could tour and I would just do the old sketches and everyone would love it. But Trigger Happy was all made up on the spot. It was all improvised. There's nothing written because you can't write anything because you don't know what the person you're going to meet is going to say. And so half the stars of Trigger Happy were the members of the public. So I thought, how do you turn that into a stage show? It's very difficult. So originally I was going to just it was going to be about showing some of the clips on a massive screen, people enjoying watching them in a communal setting, and then me talking about how things came about, and of course all the things that went wrong, because lots of things did go wrong. But it needs to be more than that, and so we've really broadened it now. So some of the characters are going to come to life and actually going to be on stage, interact with people in the audience, and then obviously it's Trigger Happy, so expect the unexpected, but you're not going to be safe. I wouldn't sit anywhere near the front row, is all I'm saying.
Okay. The artist, when you're painting and stuff like this as well. And let's do. Did anybody ever kick off? When they realised it was a sketch, or did you go to them afterwards? You must have got permission from them afterwards, and said.
So everyone that appeared in Trigger Happy we had to afterwards, we had people that go up and
Yeah.
they'd have to sign a consent form. And that is a nightmare for me because actually, if that didn't exist, I'd have probably six more series of Trigger Happy. And a lot of people didn't sign, but I think people would be surprised at the reason people didn't sign. The main reason no one ever kicked off because Trigger Happy's, I felt, was never mean. It wasn't supposed to be mean. It was warm and it was more about people putting up with an idiot, me. But the main reason people didn't sign is because when they found out that they were being filmed, they were either with someone that wasn't their wife or wasn't their husband. There is an extraordinary amount of adultery going on in Britain that I was completely unaware of. So we saved a lot of marriages by not putting that on television. But I had one guy, he was a massive Trigger Happy fan, but what happens is they don't recognize you when you're doing it because you kind of you panic and you get blinkered and you don't realize. And then we went up afterwards, got his consent. He said, "Oh my God, I love Trigger Happy. Was that Trigger Happy? Oh, was that Dom Joly? Didn't recognize him." He goes, "Oh, how exciting." And then you could see the penny drop. And he went, "You mean you were filming?" We went, "Yeah." He went, "That's going on telly." He goes, "No, you can't. This is not my wife." And he rang us maybe 30 times, like our office, and said, "Please don't show it." He was terrified, poor guy. So if you're watching, we didn't, did we?
Going back to your writing, because obviously you didn't know, but I didn't realise that you spoke three languages. Your family originally
Four.
from, I'm very sorry, four languages: French, Lebanon, Czech,
French,
and
French, English, Arabic, and Czech.
wow, okay. And you were a diplomat as well in Prague for a while. Were you very young at the time? Was that what gave you the travel bug and the travel writing bug?
No, I've always had the travel bug, always had the travel writing bug. When I was a kid, I grew up in Beirut to an English family that was in Beirut. We've had a family company in Lebanon for three generations. Um, And so my dad, even though he was forced to go into the family company and as a shipping agency, he was an amateur archaeologist. And so we would, a drop of the hat, drive off into the Syrian desert or, go off into Turkey and all sorts of things. So we always, travel was to me like sacred when we were kids. My mum would always say poncy things like, remember, we're not tourists, we're travelers and stuff. And we would have foreign correspondents and travel writers come and stay at the house. And there was a real romance about travel writing to me. Um, and I suppose, again, when you grow up in Lebanon, there's limited to me in the experience of people I looked up to. The people I looked up to were foreign correspondents, diplomats, travel writers, and spies, really. So those were the
Yeah.
four things. I might have been all four. I was definitely a spy in Trigger Happy. I've been a foreign correspondent for the Independent at the Beijing Olympics. I've been a diplomat, and actually, I'm a travel writer. So I did tick them all off, which is great. But travel writing was always the plan, to be honest. I did politics at university. I loved languages. I couldn't think of a job. I started at the BBC on a sort of fast stream thing, but again, I don't fit in. So that's twice I got booted out the BBC. I didn't really fit into that. And the idea of a travel writer just was brilliant to me. But then I got sidetracked and ended up in comedy, and then I started writing for the Sunday Times. And now I do travel writing. And if I had to choose, I do lots of things. I'm a rubbish polymath, basically. But if I could choose one thing that I could do, then it would be writing because you can do it from anywhere in the world, especially now. You need a laptop and go. I just love it. It's the thing that gives me the greatest happiness. And more importantly, I think because with television now or anything I do now, everyone's always got an input. Whereas the joy of travel writing is you just sit there. I mean, obviously your editor will have a look, but essentially no one interferes with your work, and I'm a control freak.
But with that, obviously, you've got complete control of what you're doing. Which is, I'm going to quickly go back to Trigger Happy because you sold that you did a program in America as well, didn't you, for a little bit? Where you
Yeah,
sold
so
some of the rights to it or try to work it in America.
well, I didn't try and work it. America, we sold it to 80 countries, but the one place I was really interested in selling it was America, obviously, because that's a massive market. But music was massively important in Trigger Happy. I chose all the music, and it was really more. Normally, you edit a show and then you drop music on it. I didn't. I would choose tracks I wanted to use and then stretch jokes to it. So music was integral to it. But we had a blanket agreement, which meant we could use any music track and not pay in England. But the moment you sold it abroad, you had to pay all sorts of rights. And so we sold it to 80 countries with a sound alike soundtrack, which, really halved the effect of the show. The only country that bought it outright was Germany. And America, MTV were going to buy it, but they were going to have a sound alike. And I said no. And then in the end, when no one was going to pay for it, I thought, well, I might as well put it out in America. So it went to Comedy Central, and they immediately, so the show did really well, and they commissioned an American version and said, would you exec produce it? And I'd gone to the BBC by that stage. I just had a kid. I didn't really want to do that. I was over trigger happy. Although now, in hindsight, that'll be one of my business lessons I can teach you at the end or tell you at the end. But in hindsight, I probably should have done, but I didn't. And I just said no, but I will go over and exec produce it. So I went over and I just dipped my toe in the water. I went to Miami and New York and I did a couple of sketches, but I was sort of, feeling around for it. And I thought, we'll see what happens and then we'll get in the edit. And then they said, would you like to see the first show? It's going out next week. I go, what? I've just arrived. What are you talking about? And they said, the first show's going out in a week. I said, what are you talking about? I'm exec producing it. And they showed me this show and it was so awful. I actually thought someone was doing a trick on me. It was like a pastiche. And anyway, in the end, it went out, and I realized, I learned a valuable lesson: never take your foot off the brake. If you're going to do something, don't lose control. And America is just rapacious, and so I just gave up. I just thought, I just said, take my name off this, and I left. So I'm rubbish at this business. I'm. My best advice to anyone would be follow what I do and don't do it because I've made so many mistakes. But then great things happen from mistakes. And I would not change anything I've done in 25 years because it's been quite the ride.
She's one of the things I always ask entrepreneurs and business people and everybody, what is their biggest mistake? In business, would that be one of them for you?
Yeah, well, you see, I don't think it's a mistake, but I think, if I was going to tell you advice, I think the biggest thing I've learned is never make any massive career decision or massive life-changing decision work-wise the just off the back of something you've done. Because normally, if you're an artist, if you're a musician, you finished an album, or me, you finished a TV show, or business, you've just done some massive deal and it's taken years. You're sick of it. And it's stressed you out. And your instinct is to say, forget that. I want to do something completely different. Go on holiday, take a break, completely do something else, and then come back to it afresh, and then make your decision and think about what you should do. So in hindsight, if I did change something, I think I've now realized that you're very lucky to hit gold dust with something. Trigger Happy was amazing. It was a massive hit. And it was something I was particularly good at. But I think because a lot of it's improv, I never really felt I deserved it. It wasn't a skill. I now realize it is a skill, whether I like it or not. And in hindsight, I would have probably said to Channel 4, look, I'll give you a Trigger Happy TV every 3 years, but in between, I'm going to go and do my weird things. But I think you need to be aware when you lay the golden egg and hang on to that. Don't shoot the goose, which I did.
Yeah, it's a bit like big artists, have a number one hit, and every time they've got to go on stage and sing it every single night, and it just becomes a chore rather than a love
Well,
affair, really.
well, the thing is, I understand that, but you do have that big hit. And actually, that's very relevant to what I'm doing with my Trigger Happy 25th, because in the old days, if I was doing a Trigger Happy show now, I'd prank the audience. I'd probably go on stage and start reading The Great Gatsby and just read the whole book. And I'd find that incredibly funny, and it would be, awkward and weird. And that's what makes me laugh. But actually, I think it's fine to play your new hits and your new material. But the worst thing is to go and see a band you love and they just play their new album and none of their hits. So with
Yeah,
my Trigger Happy shows, definitely you're getting all the hits. So it's fine.
there's going to be a lot of it doesn't matter. The travel writing is interesting because you've been all over the world. Was it 108, 110 different countries, some bloody dangerous ones as well. What's the one country that you thought, wow, this just blows everything else away?
Well, North Korea, 100%. I mean, North
Oh,
Korea is
good.
the closest I've gone to space travel because it is like leaving the world. I mean, the world's a strange place now. We're so globalized that travel's very difficult to do. It's very difficult to go anywhere where you're not 500 meters from a Starbucks. But actually, North Korea is off the chart. I mean, but it wasn't dangerous. The irony is, all the places you've looked at possibly that I've been that appear dangerous, I don't know, Iran, Libya, North Korea, Syria, those places are not dangerous because
Right.
weirdly, I mean, some of them are now, but when you go to a place that's under a very tight dictatorship, it's a horrible place for the people who live there. But normally for the visitor, it's pretty safe. I mean, I always joke that the most dangerous place I've ever been is somewhere like Swindon at chucking out time, a market town in England at 11:30. But that's not a joke. I mean, I've genuinely felt probably more threat in sort of 11:30 midnight in a market town in England than I have almost anywhere in the world. I went to the Congo for I wrote a book on monster hunting, and there was a supposed monster in this lake called Lake Tele in the very north of Congo. And I went there, and that was the closest I came to being thinking I'm out of my comfort zone here. I took a 3 day canoe ride down a tributary of the Congo, got to this village where I was trying to negotiate access with the tribe to this lake. And we finally negotiated it. And basically, they wanted money, and we negotiated the fee. And then they all celebrated by getting drunk. And they got drunk on this, it was sort of jungle wine. It was the strongest thing I've ever tasted. And they were paralytic within an hour. And the guy that was my guide, who was going to take me the next day, went crazy and picked up a machete and tried to attack me and was tied to a tree by the rest of the tribe. And at that stage, I thought, right, enough's enough. And they all passed out, and I jumped in a canoe and buggered off. Basically, that was it. So probably that's the worst.
North Korea, I mean, that must be really surreal, the whole country. You're probably right, because dictators make sure that nothing else happens, I suppose. They rule with an iron fist, so crime is pretty
Crime
pretty
is not
minimal.
crime is non-existent. I mean, that's why you're a good dictator because you've got everywhere on lockdown. So, but even North Korea can be strange. There's luckily we had a very weird guy. The only way you can go to North Korea is part of an organized tour. And the only people that want to go to North Korea are very hardened independent travelers whose idea of hell is a coach trip. So you end up on this coach trip going around seeing just the world's dullest things. Like the first day in Pyongyang, The morning, I think, was a whole morning at the Museum of Agricultural Scythes and Lathes, but it was so boring that it was actually fantastic because it's just so weird. The whole thing, it's like you're in a massive cult. It's like being in the Truman Show. No one, everywhere else I've been where there's a dictatorship, when you get someone on their own, they'll kind of tell you what's going on. Everyone is a believer in North Korea because if they're not, they're in a gulag, you know. So, yeah, absolutely extraordinary place. My first travel book was called The Dark Tourist, and I went on holiday to places you wouldn't normally go on holiday to. So I went skiing in Iran. I weekended in Chernobyl. I went around North Korea on a coach trip. I went to the killing fields in Cambodia, and I went on an assassination vacation road trip to all assassination sites in America. It's not for everyone. My wife doesn't accompany me, but I love it.
I'm not surprised. So have you got another book pending? Have you got something else, or are you doing another travel program?
Yeah, so my last book was called The Conspiracy Tourist, and I've been hanging around the world with conspiracy tourists, basically, so you don't have to. I took a flat earther to the edge of the flat earth. There's a conspiracy that Finland doesn't exist, so I went to Finland. It does exist. And I'm so bored of these people, and I get so attacked online by them now. So my next book is a kind of it's a cleansing process. It's called The Soul Tourist, and the subheading is In Desperate Pursuit of Happiness. And basically, I'm going off to see if a middle-aged grumpy ex-goth like myself can find something that gives me happiness. So I've been to Rishikesh in India trying to find yoga. I went to where the Beatles went in 1968. I did a big road trip around Denmark, which is supposed to be the happiest country in the world, and I think I concur actually. So that's the next one. It's much more positive.
And where did the Beatles go in 1968?
So in 1968, the Beatles went to Rishikesh to an ashram. They got into transcendental meditation, and there was this very dodgy guy called the Maharishi, and he invited them out there, and they went there. George Harrison was massively into it, as was John Lennon. Paul McCartney less so. Ringo Starr hated every second of it and wanted to just fly home. And they wrote most of the White Album there. And they were joined by people like someone from the Beach Boys, Donovan, Mia Farrow. Mia Farrow's sister was there and was so into transcendental meditation that the song Dear Prudence was written about it. Dear Prudence, won't you come out and play? It was a fascinating place, absolutely amazing. And that kind of kicked off the whole Western interest in sort of Eastern philosophy and everyone dressing like hippies for the 70s and stuff. So it was an amazing place.
I remember, yeah, Yellow Submarine, the Beatles cartoon. That was all sort of stemmed from that, isn't it? If I remember rightly.
Well, that was more stem from LSD intake, I think. Yeah.
That's definitely. Look, unfortunately, we can't be running out of time already, actually. But so I'll ask you a couple of personal questions. First thing of all, have you got a book by the side of the bed? What is it? Is it fiction? Do you read fiction as well as a,
I don't.
is
I'm
there a
very,
genre that you're reading?
I don't. So firstly, I listen to audiobooks almost constantly. I go to sleep with something on and I listen to stuff all the time. So I have to keep restarting and I think osmosis. But no, I'm almost entirely non-fiction. I'm obsessed with history books, politics books, a lot of travel stuff. I just don't find myself reading much fiction. In fact, I can barely remember the last time I read a fiction book. So in front of me here, I've got what have I got? I've got a book about Istanbul, which is the one I'm reading at the moment. I've got one. This is a great travel book, Travels with a Tangerine, which is the world's first. He was a Moroccan travel writer called Ibn Battuta, and he was in 11th century and stuff. So that's the kind of stuff I read. I love it. I'm obsessed with Patrick Leigh Fermor, all sorts of stuff.
Do you read national newspapers as well? You into regional papers as too, or?
Less and less. I mean, I write for them, but I don't read them. I mean, I dip in and out of them, but I just find newspapers more and more desperately trying to chase online stuff. So I get my information from all sorts of places. I do a lot of presenting for LBC now, so I listen to a lot of radio, a lot of podcasts, and I kind of have actually for my radio stuff, I get given news summaries, and so I feel like a really rubbish president. I'm given a news briefing, so that's easy.
If you go have something to listen to in your car or something, what kind of music do you like, or what's the last, what's the thing you've got on your CD rack or?
Well, I'm very glad you asked that because music is a massive, massive part of Trigger Happy TV. And I had three gold disc soundtrack albums from it. And actually, one of the things I've done for the Trigger Happy 25th anniversary is on Spotify, if anyone is. I've
Okay.
made a playlist called Trigger Happy 25. And what I did was I chose 25 songs that have been released since Trigger Happy finished that if they'd have been out at the time, I would have put them on. So to give you an idea, there's a band called Wonder Horse that are amazing. A song called Teal. There's a guy called Young Blood I love called Low Life. There's a band I love called the Boxer Rebellion. There's Gang of Youths is an amazing band from Australia called Do Not Let Your Spirit Rain Wane. So loads. I'm massively into my music. But if you
Wow,
go on
I'm gonna.
Spotify, look up Dom Joly and find Trigger Happy 25, it's all there.
Okay, fantastic. I would definitely look that up because I'm always looking for music when I'm doing the garden or pooting
They're
around. So I
lovely.
love music as well. Okay, unfortunately, we're definitely running out of time, Dom. So I've got to ask you for your top three business tips, please. So what would those be?
Well, my top one I've already mentioned, but I really, really think it's important that don't make any massive decision, any sort of life-changing decision too quickly or on the spur of the moment. I'm very impulsive and I tend to follow my gut. And I think that's a very bad mistake on big things. I think you really need to sit back and sort of disassociate yourself for a bit and stuff. Secondly, do not, like me, marry another artist. Marry an accountant, marry a lawyer, marry marry someone with some business sense. Because I am just appalling business wise. I have no head for numbers. I have a complete phobia of forms and bureaucracy. And unfortunately, my wife is very similar. So it means we have a fantastic time, but financially, we're just a shambles. So that's terrible.
It's in
Um,
your website designer, I read. Is that right?
Yes, she is. She's a very, very good designer. She used to work for the Sunday Times and was a designer on the Sunday Times, and then stopped to have our kids, and now is a sculptress and an artist, and a very good one, but as equally financially rubbish as I am. And then the third one, um, I still think, I still think it's what my dad told me, and it's one of the oldest one. Neither a lender nor a borrower be. And I unfortunately are both. I mean, I'm terrible on it. I mean, my main business advice is just read anything you can about any decisions I've made financially and don't do that. The one skill I have as an artist, as I'm not an artist, but as whatever I am, as a creative, is I tend to move to areas when they're still relatively cheap, and then they become quite cool because I think people like us that can't afford as much move to places and they become quite hip, and then people with money and less artistic sensibility move in after us. I did that. I bought a flat in Notting Hill when it wasn't Notting Hill, Portobello Road, which I bought for 90 grand and sold for insane money to Salman Rushdie. And I moved down here I moved to Cheltenham early enough when it's becoming hip. So I think that's my one thing I have is I think I can spot an area and I know where the next big area is going to be in England, but I'm not telling you because I've got to buy a house there first. But it's not Gloucestershire.
Dom Joly, thanks ever so much for joining Punchline Talks, Gloucester, punchlinegloucester.com. If you like the show, please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll be back again next week. But until then, remember, it's all in the punchline. And of course, I would like to thank our fantastic sponsors, Investor IT Solutions, as well. Until then, thanks so very much for watching. Bye.